Point Blank is a crime fiction podcast. It may not be suitable for all listeners. We discuss violence in all its forms. The works we reference may include period slang, which some listeners may find offensive. The hosts also have a tendency to swear.
Episode 51, Russian Roulette with Justin and Kurt. Hello, Point Blank listeners. My name's Kurt. Joining me for this exciting episode 51 is Justin.
Hi, party people. How you doing tonight?
Well, hopefully they're doing good because I know you have a drink in your hand, don't you, Justin?
I do. I have a rum and coke with Florida Caña rum from Nicaragua. It's one of my favorites.
Ooh, I have some delicious Big Wave Golden Ale beer from Kona Brewing.
Uh-huh.
And we're kicking back and I don't know, not relaxing, but we're shooting the shit today about our first 50 episodes. We're going to play Russian Roulette with all of our reviews. And normally this episode in our sequence of new episodes is going to be a review show, a 5-round burst show. So instead of doing that this time, we're answering 5 questions, a retrospective of our first 50 episodes, and looking at some of our best and maybe some of our worst from those first 50.
Indeed, both for sure. This is a fun episode for us. We're sort of letting down our hair, and it's an opportunity for us to have one of these rare reflective moments where we look back on what we've done and ask ourselves why the hell we did it, and also what really stood out to us and what would we change. It's like Kurt said, it's a Russian roulette. We're up against the wall and we're being forced to answer hard questions about our own past.
That's right, Justin. Where were you on the night of December 15th, 1997?
Yeah, we should have called this interrogation.
Oh, yeah, that would be good. Under the spotlight.
Russian roulette's more dramatic, though.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it's a good foreshadowing of our next episode about spy fiction. But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit there.
That's true.
So it was interesting, Justin, for me to simply look back and look at our list of episodes because I honestly, when I looked back, there were some books I kind of forgot we had read for the show, and main topic books at that. Were there any of those for you that you just completely had forgotten we had covered?
Yeah, I mean, not that I had forgotten them, but it did take a while for the wheel to start moving. I had to go back and scan the whole list to make sure I wasn't missing some obvious novels that I enjoyed that I completely blanked on, and there were quite a few, including some in my favorite author and favorite novel categories. I would have blanked on them if there was a gun to my head and I had to make a choice. So
yeah,
I guess that's a consequence of doing 50 of these things.
Yeah, and I mentioned that on the towards the end of our 50th episode there that I do think one of the big downfalls of doing a show like this is that you discover some of these things in authors or series that are just really grab you, and then you have to move on to the next thing. And that certainly was the case in some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. But yeah, there were 2 that don't come up in a category for me, so I'm going to mention them. I had kind of forgotten that we had read the book The Doomsters until I looked at the book, the list, which is weird because I really love the name of the book. I had forgotten about that.
Yeah.
And also the Black Mask Boys. And now a lot of those authors have come up again and multiple times in the show. But the actual book that we read that compiled those short stories, I had forgotten the title of that one. So it was nice.
I was going to say that's the fun thing about this project. We did the Black Mask Boy review in episode 7 back in 2017, and when we both first read that, the majority of the authors were brand new. We had not known any of these names. I mean, Dash Hammett and Ray Chandler aside, these were foreign entities to us. But in the meantime, as you said, we've read several of those authors and have come to know them as authors in their own right from standalone works. So reflecting back on how little we knew, we were never in denial about that fact. We were always transparent with this podcast about how we were going into the crime fiction genre open-minded and as newbies who, had read some stuff but were not experts in the field. But going back 3 years, it's surprising how many, and oftentimes how many authors that we knew nothing about, and now we are very familiar with, to the point where we forgot that we did not know them once.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I hear your glass rattling there, and I'm going to take a sip off my beer, and we'll get into our first question.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, so I guess, Justin, I'll ask you one, you can ask me one, we can go back and forth like that.
Sure.
So our first question today is, who's your favorite author that we've covered? I mean, this could be any author. We're trying to narrow it down to one, but I'm going to guess that we're both going to have a little trouble with that.
Yeah, that will be difficult. Fortunately, we've read a lot of authors that are good at what they do, and we try to pick books featuring authors that we either respect or have a feeling that we'll value in some way. But if I were to answer this question straight, of the authors we've featured, and I'm going to base this on having read more than one of their books, not just one short story I read. So I want there to be a little bit more scrutiny in who I pick. But I would say that the favorite author of mine is Jim Thompson.
Oh, I don't think that's no surprise there.
No, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't close competition. I can easily explain that rationale, not that I need to, but I've always been delighted by his work. It says something that he provokes me and interrogates me, and somehow his work, which is so simple, stands the test of time and always seems fresh. So I feel like anything I've read by him does that for me, so I got to give him the nod. But I'm going to throw a few other names that were in my top criteria, I guess. My top tier would include, and I'm not sure where we stand with Ray Chandler, but I'm still a Raymond Chandler fan, and I can't wait to review another one of his books. I like Dash Hammett's short fiction more than I like his novels. I like David Goodis, but we only read one book, but damn, that was a good book. Dorothy Hughes, we read one book, but damn, was that a good book. And in terms of international novels, authors that are new to me that really, stood out in some way, Paco Ignacio Taibo from Mexico.
Yeah.
That would be my finalists for this question. And that's not to say that other authors weren't great, but these are the ones that just rise to the top for me personally. How does that sit with you? What was your favorite author, and how much of it aligns and how much clashes with my answers?
Well, I don't think this is going to be a surprise, Justin, that my answer doesn't clash with yours that much on this one. And that, it's kind of the whole reason why we ended up doing the show together anyway, and also that it works out because we have similar tastes on some of these things. And yes, it is Jim Thompson.
Aha! Fanfare.
Yeah, it's
dun, 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 dun.
It's no surprise. It's Jim because of his work, for the reasons you said. It feels fresh. He has a large enough body of work. He's not somebody who just wrote 2 or 3 novels, even if they were excellent novels. But he has a body of work that holds up. Are they all classics? No, but the bulk of them are. And there's something about Thompson's writing that has always spoke to me. And I find it exciting. I find it interesting, engaging, all of the things I want from good fiction. And it also helps that he has a very interesting life that we discussed last episode. Some other authors that were on the short list here is I have to give another shout out to Charles Williams because I still love his work. He was the motivation for starting this show because I saw an author who was writing in this general category. And I was like, here's a guy whose book I really enjoyed. I've never heard of him before. And this is good stuff. I think what's really encouraging to me about Charles Williams is that since we did that episode 3 years ago, I've seen more reprints of his work, more articles about him across the internet. And I am glad to see that other readers are rediscovering this guy's fiction. Other names that made the list, Chester Himes, because I hadn't really heard of him before. And I found a lot of quality to his work, a lot of, not really freshness per se, but a unique voice that I wanted to hear more from.
Yeah, I hear that.
We both love Cormac McCarthy. We knew that before we sat to ever even consider doing this podcast. He'd made a short name on the list. Megan Abbott, simply for Queen Pin alone. I love that book a lot. It still surprises me that Megan Abbott's Queen Pin episode is one of our least downloaded episodes. So, you really should check that book out.
Yeah, come on, dudes.
And I'm also not going to disagree with you. Paco Taibo, I think he speaks to both of our hearts from where he's coming from, and his detective. I think we'll probably end up talking about a little bit later as well.
There is a chance. I want to speak to your mention of Charles Williams, and you're right. You introduced me to Charles Williams. It was, as you said, his work his maritime noir, work that helped inspire you to get this podcast going. And when I first read him, I got it. I understood. While I have not read any of his work in 3-4 years since we started, I read Scorpion Reef and another one. But it has me looking back fondly on authors I want to revisit, authors I value but maybe haven't quite figured out fully yet. But I totally hear you again on the note that you were on the crest of something when you brought him to my attention and to the listeners' attention here at Point Blank, because I've seen him articles about him in Crime Reads, and I've seen random blog posts erupt on the interwebs about his work and him being a long lost legend, that kind of thing. So good on you, Kurt, for bringing him to the world's attention, at least in part.
Well, if I got 2 readers to check out his work, I'll be happy with that. But I'm hoping
you did.
Yeah,
at least 2, including me. I mean, that narrows it down.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so I guess we should move on to our next question.
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Shoot.
So we addressed our favorite author that we featured. Now, who is your favorite character of all the books we've read? Is there a character that stands out?
Okay, so this was actually the most difficult question that when we came up with our list of questions here for me to answer, and it forced me to ask myself the question: am I really reading crime fiction for the characters? And that's kind of a big question, right? Because character work is such an important part to this genre, and
yeah, it's an existential question. It raises the question of whether or not we're plot based, we're looking for thrills, or if we're actually putting our energy in, appreciating character development.
And I think the short answer on this is maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm there for the plot. Maybe I'm there for the setting or the thrills, as you say. Maybe I'm just interested in essentially, well, I guess typecast characters in a little bit who are just filling a role in the fiction. But, then there are characters that I've read that change that for me. So I don't, I'm going to have to think about that question. But I gave it a lot of thought, and I think my favorite character that we've read for the show, and this goes back to Paco Taibo, which I just mentioned in the first question.
I knew it.
Yep, it's gonna be Hector Shane, the detective to the downtrodden, the protector of the poor of Mexico City, the rough and tumble, Coca-Cola swigging and cigarette smoking detective. I just love him.
It's no surprise to me that you've fallen for the radical romantic.
No. I wouldn't be surprised if he's on your list as well, Just.
We will find out very, very shortly. Are there other characters that were finalists for your decision?
Well, and I hate to throw this all the way back to episode 1, and maybe this is just because it's fresh in my mind, but Jim Thompson's characters do stand out to me.
Yeah. Those crooked cops, man, they'll sear their way into your consciousness.
Well, and it's not just that element, but Lou Ford, he happens to be a cop in that story, but he could just as easily be a judge or a doctor or someone else of some amount of authority within the city that he exists. But he's
True.
He's a haunting character. He's stuck with me very vividly through 50 episodes of the show. And I honestly don't know how many books we've read as far as reviews. I mean, Justin, my guess is I've read somewhere between 250 and 300 books just for this show.
Oh, sure. I wouldn't be surprised. You, especially early on, you were reading the majority of the 5-round bursts, and you have those long stints on your boat with a lot of books on hand and not much else to do. So,
and I think to have a character last with that degree of weight over 50 episodes really speaks to to that character. So it could be Lou Ford. But the one if I wanted to spend more time with a character, it's going to be Hector. I want to hang out with him.
Perhaps we will in the future. We've only reviewed the one book. I think down the road we might revisit a trip to Mexico. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
We are. So, what's your favorite character?
All right. So, my answer is going to be obvious. My favorite character is Puss Walgreen.
Yeah, we haven't had a Puss Walgreen in a long time. Oh boy.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, remember that one year we were sort of dorking out on Puss Walgreen in our. For new listeners, in the first few episodes, we were trying to each episode identify a character in our featured novel that has the most absurd name, and this was tethered to the character of Puss Walgreen, which in The Big Sleep, if I recall correctly, is a character who comes in, does absolutely nothing to the plot, and has a unique and memorable name. I mean, I think that was the gist of it.
Yeah.
A character that does nothing but is memorable for some absurd reason. So we did that for a while, and then it just sort of faded away. There's a nostalgic reason for picking Puss, but that's more tongue-in-cheek. I do have an actual answer as well. And you're not going to be surprised by this one. It's Paco Ignacio Taibo's long-running detective, Hector Velasco Ranchain. He's my number one. I find him to be charming, sympathetic, flawed, nostalgic, thoughtful, radical, and a character who brings something new, or for me, brought something new to the genre after having read all the big names. You know, it's easy to pick Philip Marlowe or some of these originators, but I'm trying to look outside the box and think about characters that I didn't expect to discover, and then once discovered, realized how awesome they were, or how much they set with me in a way that was positive. It's cool that we consensed upon Shane. I did not expect that, but I understand it.
Yeah. Who else do you have there, Justin?
Yeah, I have a couple more, and one of them is, it was pretty much a tie, but I went with Paco and Hector because there's more of Paco and Hector. But my other one on the short list was Gloria Denton from Megan Abbott's Queenpin.
Oh.
So there's Queenpin returning.
Yeah.
Gloria Denton was the antagonist, the tough as shit, hard as nails, but sensitive, self-aware, genuine mentor to our newbie protagonist in that book. The protagonist never gets named, but we know Gloria. She's a legend, and I really loved her character and the quiet power she brought, and just the toughness and the femininity and all that stuff. That was new for me to crime fiction, and I thought really hard hitting in a way that stands out.
That would have been a short list for me too. That it's a very memorable character that sticks with you and is just. I really wish Queenpin would be made into a movie. I can think of so many actresses who would be perfect for that role, and I think it would make a pretty decent neo-noir film.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's a minimalist enough read that when I imagine it, I already have the movie in my head. It's so terse and focused that I see every scene. It's perfectly made for cinema. It's set up for a qualified director to come in and turn that into gold. But it's strange that it hasn't happened. I wonder why.
Yeah, I don't know. It's also interesting considering that Megan Abbott does have Hollywood connections at this point, because she has a series about high school cheerleaders or something.
Yeah. She lives in L.A. and she's playing the Hollywood game. So I'll make sure to tweet her account and let her know that we approve of this move. There's one other character that I would put on this list, even though I feel like it's cheating. I don't like including Cormac McCarthy in my top 10s or top 5s for the show, because I already love him. And I already knew him before I even got into crime fiction.
Sure.
But if I had to pick another favorite character, Anton Chigurh is the best bad guy I've ever seen or read. And I don't think that's ever going to change.
I can totally see that. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, when we sat down to do these questions, and folks, we didn't compare notes on any of this before we sat down to answer the question. So we're just getting spontaneous reactions here, but we probably could have said, hey, maybe at the beginning we'll just say Jim Thompson and Cormac McCarthy are kind of off the list, because that might be too obvious.
Yeah. Well, we're showing our hand, but it's okay. People are looking for authenticity here, I assume.
I guess the real point is if you enjoy the show and you've listened this far, you're listening today, and you haven't checked out some of these people that come up time and time again with Justin and I, you really should, because we really just enjoy the hell out of them. So
Totally.
I guess we can move on to the next question, unless you got anything else there, Justin.
No, I'm good. Throw it at me.
Okay, so this is going to be a two-part question. So we're going to talk about setting here, and let's ask the first question first, and then get both of our answers, and then go to the second part. That question is, what has been your favorite setting of all of the books that we've taken a look at so far?
Okay, so my first, my knee-jerk reaction is Los Angeles, but it's not true.
Okay.
I think Los Angeles is my knee-jerk because it's my first. It's my Raymond Chandler moment. I first read Raymond Chandler and fell in love with noir as perceived through his prism. And that was in LA of the 1930s and 40s, and I do like that. However, when I think back on everything we've read, LA isn't the place that really sticks out for me. If I had to think of one city in the U.S., it would be San Francisco. It would be Dash Hammett. I would blame part of that on the fact that you and I went to San Francisco and spent a couple days there doing the Dash Hammett tour, wandering around, getting drunk, sort of soaking up the crime fiction nostalgia and all that. But I think it's more than that. I think that it's the way that Dash captures atmosphere, and it's the fact that he's not the only one who visits and returns to San Francisco in a way that moved me. But that would be the big city. In terms of a place, I would say I also love anything that takes place in the Intermountain West or the Southwest. I live in the Southwest, but I also love places. I love the rural West of America, of the U.S., and how that plays a role in fiction that creates conditions that are unique. The emptiness, the open spaces, the loneliness. I really like that, and I'm a sucker for Western American fiction. And I'm going to add one more answer. The other answer, and I'll talk about this more later, but I would say outside of the U.S., my favorite places were Mexico City, which is like an endless gift, an infinite resource of settings and plots and characters, but also industrial Japan. When we went to Japan, we read that novel Out, and it was set in this working class industrial sector of Japan that was so new to me and so shocking in contrast to the glitz and techno glamour of Tokyo and what I know, stereotypically of Japan, that it really set a tone and it really stuck with me. So those are my answers. I'll be curious to hear how they differ from yours.
Well, those are some good answers. I definitely enjoy books like you were talking about in rural America, especially when they capture that lonely emptiness of much of the American countryside. And it's interesting to compare that to the historic fiction, even the fiction of say the early crime fiction movement in the 20s and 30s, as we've talked about in the past, like transitioning from the Western to the private eye and so on. But now this modern wave of this isolation in rural America is one that I do really enjoy as well. When I was thinking about this, I immediately went to international. My favorite setting that we've looked at was Nigeria and Lagos. I just was drawn to that. I was just, it's this mega city concept where anything can happen, and often anything does happen. And right now as we record this, they're having craziness going on right now. They're fighting government corruption, which we talked about in that episode.
It's coming to roost right now. There have been dozens of citizens shot and killed by the police, and there's a true uprising. I've been thinking about that too, and I thought about Lagos as an answer for this question, but I decided because that particular book, my sister, the serial killer. Yeah, I wanted there to be so much more Lagos than there was in that book. That while I love Lagos, I want to go back there. That book wasn't it for me. So I feel like I want to find that book, that Lagos set novel that just envelops me in that space, because I agree with you. There's something special about it.
Yeah, and for me, it might be because I read a lot more of the supporting books for that episode. The Lagos Noir, the Easy Motion Tourist. Oh, there was another couple that I'm forgetting, but just that really, really captured it for me. The other one, the other setting that I really just enjoyed the hell out of was Marseille in Total Chaos by Jean-Claude Izzo.
Oh, you love that book.
I do, and again, there's one where I've read the entire trilogy. It's based on 3 books, and we just took a look at book 1, so I have a little bit more to go on there. But this metropolitan European city, coastal city, port city, ancient city that is being affected by North Africa, by France itself, by the Eastern Mediterranean, all coming together in this place. And I love places like that. I love places like, Hawaii, for example, or Istanbul, or those types of locations. And part of this might be, just what's available in translation, but those have been my favorite settings. The other thing that I do really like when it's done well is I liked the confined setting. And when I mean confined here, I'm not talking about like Scandinavian
locked door mystery.
Well, I'm not talking about locked door mystery, but I'm also not talking about like, oh, we're on some Scandinavian island or something like that. I'm talking about where you've really limited the characters, you've really limited the confines of where the scenes can take place. And Charles Williams, actually, one of his books that we didn't cover, but I have read, he has one where the bulk of the book takes place on one relatively small sailboat and one spit of sand in a shoal area off a reef. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And to have it that limited is really like, when that's written well, I love it. I love that because there's no tricks you can play.
No, your options are limited, both as characters in the story, but also as an author. You are forced to reckon with your limitations in a way that really cranks up the tension, cranks up the opportunity for conflict, because you don't have the benefit of having a guy walk in with a gun to shake things up when you get confused about where you're going with the plot.
Yeah, and actually this reminds me, I didn't mean to get into these kinds of reviews on this show, but this is what we're doing today. It's loose, it's free. I'm going to recommend a show on Netflix, and it's called Criminal, and there's a couple of different versions of this. There's one in the UK, there's like a Spanish version, a German version, a French version, but all the show is an interrogation room, the room where, the one-way mirror, the people who are watching the interview, and a hallway. That's it. Those are the three areas. And the entire show takes place through the course. Each episode is one interview, and the writing and dialogue and the acting is just very well done. And I love the ability to create tension and tell a story in that confined space. So,
yeah, it's like a play. I think people who are young writers looking to hone their chops on how to write dialogue, how to craft characters in a room or in a space together, and how they engage, they would benefit from reading screenplays, looking at how playwrights craft their dialogue, because you're limited. You have to focus on the nuances of human interaction and language, including body language, and it can really up the bar and increase tension in very subtle but palpable ways.
Yeah. So I guess we can move on to the second part of this question, and Justin, that is, where do you want to see more crime fiction set? What are you looking for from new releases or in the future?
Okay, well, I do have a clear answer that connects a little bit with what you said before. I want more crime fiction in Africa. I want to read more. I want to see more put out there. I want to see it entangle in different ways the colonial and neo-colonial, responses to history. I want fiction that indicts corrupt colonial and post-colonial systems. I want to see Africa as it really is for once in my goddamn life. I'm so tired of Africa getting a short shrift and getting ignored. So this is where my spotlight is going forward. I'm excited about when we did the Lagos episode, I bought probably 10 additional books, which I haven't read yet. They're all on shelves, but a book set in Kenya, book set in Ghana, book set in Nigeria, etc., in the Congo. And I want to read them. I want to understand what's happening out there, and I want to bring that back to the readers. So that's my answer. That's where my heart is, because it's where I know least. It's a spot that's given the least amount of attention over history from the West.
Yeah, and that's a pretty. I like that answer. I wrote down pretty much one word for my answer to this. I want to see more work in translation. I want to see more global authors.
Good answer.
And as a noir fan, and I think we're far enough into this to say that, for the most part, you and I are more noir fans than we are detective fiction fans, even though we do like that kind of fiction. If we had to really boil it down into what we like, I think that's kind of it. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. I think the reason why is because detective fiction falls too quickly into formula, and noir, while sometimes formulaic, can also cross into literary fiction and other genres of fiction very easily. There's more of it, and there's more quality noir than there is detective.
True. Yeah.
That would be my guess.
And so I want to see more work in translation. And as a fan of noir and crime fiction, one thing that we've seen on this show is there is a lot of really quality classic works in this genre. There's a lot of I don't know how many classics are really hidden anymore. I mean, I'm sure there's a few, but have been a lot of people digging around and looking for those classics and trying to make them better known. We need to get out of the idea that noir is, first of all, an American thing. And, I think a lot of American listeners kind of, or maybe not listeners, but readers kind of have that perception. And I also think that we need to get it out of this historic, it's not a historic thing. It's a living, breathing genre. And I want to see what the world is doing with the genre. And that's what I want. I want translation. And with that will come the settings that I would like to see in the future.
I think that's a great answer. And I agree with you. I think one of the big struggles we had when we went around the world, of course, we went to some English-speaking places. The benefit of Nigeria is that it's a former English colony, so we have the English translations easily accessible. There was a bigger challenge in to some extent in Japan, to some extent in Brazil with Portuguese, and there were many authors that I sought or wanted to read in the Mediterranean that were famous, that were really well known in Italy and in Northern Africa, but some of their biggest works had not yet been translated. So that's a treasure trove for noir, for crime fiction readers that hasn't been made accessible because in my case I'm shitty at being multilingual, and that's a disappointment. So I would love to see that rectified.
Yeah. The only other one that I had thought of, and this is I think a book that's probably not even necessarily, you can't write it just yet, but I really want to see some noir or crime fiction that really captures the nuance of the polarized American political landscape right now.
Oh, boy.
And I think that's going to be a real challenge, and I think it's going to require some distance. And I think that could be, it's going to be something that can be written very poorly, very easily, but to really do it justice is going to be a very big challenge. I want to read that.
I think 10 years from now,
Yeah.
10 years from now, there will be 2 or 3 books that we glom onto as, I don't know, exemplary or capturing the essence of this weird, political moment that we're enduring.
Yeah. So, I guess with that, we could move on to our next question.
Okay. So which novel that we've featured defied your expectations the most? Now, this could be in a good or a bad way.
Well,
This is a tricky one.
It is a tricky one, and I really didn't know how to exactly answer this, so I'm just going to throw out three books that somehow fit into this category. First of all, this is a good one. This is very simple. One of the books that defied my expectations was In a Lonely Place by Dorothy Hughes, and the big The biggest reason that defied my expectations was after reading it and loving the book, it was like, why the hell is this not better known? Yeah. This should be, and we kind of know it's the obvious answer is a lot of sexism. Yes.
Patriarchy.
And thankfully it is available in reprint now, but why is this not better known? This is as good as some of these other names that have been in constant print since they were originally written. So that's one. Two is They Shoot Horses, Don't They? By Horace McCoy. And that defied my expectations because even though I knew it was well regarded, even though there was a lot of, I know it's a book that's stood the test of time, it defied my expectations because, first of all, I did not think a book about a dance contest would be that engaging, and it was. And also, it was published in 1935, and I was somewhat blown away by the content of what was in there for that time frame. It's well before its time as what, I guess the cliche term would be. But that's one. And then for one that defied my expectations in a bad way, and that's Night Has a Thousand Eyes by Cornell Woolrich. From all of what I had read about Cornell Woolrich, I thought I was going to be in for a real treat of a book, and it did not deliver. And
Here.
We may very well be talking about that again soon, but so
we may.
So Justin, what are your answers for this one? What threw you off?
Okay. Well, I definitely looked at it in a good way and a bad way. I wanted to approach it from both angles, and for the good way, it was a book that I knew not enough about, or the assumptions of the book were not in any way in line with my experience, but ultimately my experience was positive or very positive. And no surprise here, given what you just said, my answer is They Shoot Horses, Don't They? And it's not just that. It's not just the content. It's not just the dance tournament, and it's not just the provocative nature of the content of the story, which is, he deals with some risque topics, abortion, suicide, nihilism. But it's the fact that I thought this was going to be a noir western set on a cattle ranch in Texas. I was totally expecting a cowboy noir story, and all of a sudden we're in Santa Monica in a gymnasium, dancing, and I was like, what the fuck is this? How is this possibly gonna survive 140 pages of plot? And somehow it did. And not only did it was great. It was a really riveting read with great philosophical depth. Talk about an eye opener. I would have come across that book and said, this looks great, had I not been part of this podcast and really sifting and winnowing through the literature. So that's my number one.
Okay.
Now, my number two, a novel that defied my expectations in a bad way. While A Night with a Thousand Eyes is most certainly that, because I had high hopes. I had the book on my shelf for months, and the image on the cover of it looked so badass and so bleak. I thought I was going to be in for a treat with that book. I was not. But this is my choice. A Flash of Green by John D. MacDonald. And I know folks out there are still flabbergasted that we both did not like John D. MacDonald. I went to a MFA program in Florida where John D. MacDonald is essentially a patron saint. So I'm a bit of a heretic when I say I'm not sure I like him. But it might have been partly my fault. I know that there are good books I know he's written some great books. I know that his Travis McGee character is renowned. I've read several books with Travis, and he is a good character. It's a good read. We picked poorly, and we picked A Flash of Green, which was going to be like a eco noir set in sleepy Western Florida. I figured it was going to be hard boiled. I figured there'd be a lot of fistfights and trouble and violence and assassinations and big bosses getting theirs and whatnot. It turns out it was about greed, but it wasn't hard boiled or noirish. It was just like a domestic drama of people sitting in lanais and porches talking about how hot it is and talking about greed in a more casual way. And it just put me to sleep, and it was like pulling teeth out to read. And I hope other people had a different opinion about it. Kurt and I talked about this book in depth, in our episodes on it, and it was just, we were not expecting what we got, and had we had a choice, we would have chosen a different book. It didn't land right for us. I think it was John D. McDonald's trying to write a book for a general audience and not a noir audience, and we didn't know that. So, oops. But damn, that was a disappointment, a big one for me. I'm going to add a third one, a bonus. This is a book that defied my expectations in a different way that wasn't necessarily good or bad. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. I was very much expecting a dystopian sci-fi novel, but it was not nearly as noirish as I expected it to be. I mean, that's because I saw Blade Runner and Ridley Scott's film. I assumed that the book was going to be seeping in the same type of image and like noirish, dark city resonance. And there wasn't as much of it as I expected. It was fine. It was still a really good book for other reasons, but not for that reason. So that's my answer. There's some alignment with you, but what do you think about that? I know that you have your own opinions about A Flash of Green.
Yeah. No, I can't really disagree with you on that. I mean, I guess I was a little less shocked by Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. I think we may very well revisit A Flash of Green in an upcoming question as well. So I'll save some comments for that.
Sounds
All
good.
right, so we're going to move into our last, this is kind of a mega question, but our last category here, and this is going to be best and worst of the show. So we're going to have two best type responses and one worst. So Justin, the first question is, what is the best book that you read in conjunction with the show in any way that was not a main topic book?
Damn, we read so many more books than we featured as main topics.
Yes.
So there's a large pool
Yes.
to consider. And you read different books from me, but in terms of the books that I've read, the ones that stuck with me, the ones that moved me, the ones that I thought, wow, this is better than the one we're featuring. Like, why? Whoops. That's part of the learning curve. That's part of the experience of hosting a podcast like this. You learn as you go. I would say that, and this isn't going to be a surprise, I would say that it's a tie. And the first one is North and Central by Bob Hartley.
Okay.
Hey ho, Bob. You know, I'm not picking books that, I'm not picking just classic authors. I'm looking at authors who we've read books and they merit, I feel like these certain books merit or would merit a deeper dive. So I would say North and Central by Bob Hartley, and the second one would be Coal Black by Chris McGinley. So you'll see the angle I took here. Newer authors that are less acclaimed or less legendary, but who've done some special work that I think deserves a little bit more attention than we were able to give it in a few minutes.
Yeah, no, those are good answers. And I would say North and Central in particular, to me, I come back to that. I think about that book a lot. And I think that says something, as I mentioned, you know, if we've read, each of us have read 250, 300, whatever books for this show, and to even, you know, make it into the memory after all of those books is an accomplishment. But North and Central is one that sticks out to me, and it might have made my list as well. Now, I went with a little bit different direction on this question. I was thinking about authors in particular who, you know, are bigger names, and I like the way you approached this question. But the one author that I really wish, and I would actually advocate for a main topic, would be Ken Bruin. I really like Ken Bruin's work. I'm particularly a huge fan of the Jack Taylor series of novels, the battered, alcoholic, on-again, off-again, drug-abusing former cop who solves mysteries and whatnot in his hometown in Ireland. And it's, you know, there's just something that's haunting and lyrical and literary about it that just speaks to me. And every single book in that series that I've read, and I think I've read more than half at this point, is just a hit for me. I really love them. But I think it's a little bit like Paco Taibo in his detective fiction. Like, sometimes you finish one and you're like, was that even really a book? I'm not exactly sure. So it's about the whole experience, and I love that. James Salas is another one, and I forgot to write down the title of the book, but he is most notable as the original author that the movie Drive is based on. some his work is very similar as well. So if there's two, and I don't have a specific title for either of these authors, but if there's authors that I really enjoyed that were not main topics, it's James Salas and Ken Bruin.
All right. I will admit fully that I've read neither of those authors, so I will put them on my list.
So oh boy, Justin, guess which question we're on now?
Yeah, I can guess, and I have a feeling that we're going to be a little bit overlapping
I
here.
think that's probably true, and that is, what is the worst book we have read as a main topic for this show? And I think we are going to both need to apologize to the listeners for bringing these candidates to their attention.
Yeah, well, I will start by saying I'm not including books that I read from people who sent us books or the books that I picked up on a whim and thought, well, maybe I'll review these. And, there were several books that were just so poorly written or so absurdly egotistical and navel-gazing that I couldn't say enough bad about them, so I usually choose not to say anything at all. Try to walk that fine line between taking a high road on this show. But for these two, we feature them. We made them our main books with the expectation that they would meet our expectations, and they both failed. One is a popular winner of our Raspberry Award here, A Flash of Green by John D. MacDonald. This book bored the shit out of me. And the other one I did not like at all is Cornell Woolrich's A Night Has a Thousand Eyes. I really wanted to like it, but it just felt so self-absorbed and annoyingly stupid. I couldn't. Those are my two biggies. I don't want to talk too much about them. They don't deserve the attention. Kurt.
No, and you know what? It's not going to be any surprise that these are also my two selections. I mean, A Flash of Green was really not good, in my opinion, and I know from reading other John D. MacDonald work that we failed our listeners on this one because there were much better choices. That was a mistake, and it's a terrible book. Don't read it. Read something else by John D. MacDonald.
Yeah, he's got about 400 other books. So
yeah.
Pick one.
And now Night Has a Thousand Eyes. I'm not going to say that this is a good book because it's not. What I can say about A Night Has a Thousand Eyes is I am not as turned off to the work of Cornell Woolrich from just reading this one as you are. I still see some potential in his work, and I do want to come back to it at some point. I mean, I know he's well regarded, and I know people said, hey, you need to give him another chance when we did that, and I'm maybe at the point where I could bring myself to do that again. I can see where, if it was done a little bit differently or a little bit better, or maybe definitely shorter, Cornell Woolrich's this dread that he brought up in that book could be done well. In this case, not so much.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring out one. The only book I read for this show that actually made me just irate, actually legitimately mad. Do you remember that biography that I read about Dash Hammett that was written by some member of the UK Communist Party?
Yeah, I thought you hate. I thought you were disappointed with it.
Oh, no,
you hated it.
Well, I mean, it actually made me mad to read that book because of how poorly the conclusions were made in it, and the research was in my mind piss poor. I don't remember the name.
Were they being overly dogmatic?
Well, it was jumping to conclusions that didn't really, there was no supporting evidence, and it just, it was definitely, written by some Communist Party hack, and
yeah, they were trying to spin Dash into a good old comrade without evidence, which is easy to do when somebody's dead.
I remember I put a warning on it. I did it at the end of the episode, and I told people to turn it off if they didn't want to listen to me go on a diatribe about about that book.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, so that might, if there's a nonfiction choice for me, that's it. So I guess we could move into much better territory here and get into what was your favorite book that we featured on this show, Justin.
Oh crap! As a main topic,
it's tough, isn't it?
I mean, I have a short list. We featured 30 or so deep dives, and I'm going to say that I'm going to leave Jim Thompson out of it. We've already talked about him. I'm going to say that some of these are nostalgic and some of these are just surprising books that really stood out to me, and books that stood the test of time. One of them is going to be Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep. I love that book. It was one of the first crime fiction novels I read. I loved Philip Marlowe. I loved the world. I loved the vibe. And even if the plot is sort of stitched together and a little bit absurd, and we still don't know who killed certain people and whatnot, the book still stands out to me as a big moment in my understanding of the genre. Now, I'm not going to say that that's my favorite. There's not one single favorite. I'm going to give a list. Maybe I'll say one at the end that's my favorite. But I'm going to say that is a huge one. Another finalist, David Goodis's Shoot the Piano Player. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Something about the way that he evoked a mood was so powerful and so cold in that book that I can't wait to revisit his work. So he's high on the list. Queen Pin by Megan Abbott is up there. It's a really fucking good read. It really does what it needs to do and does so in a way that's just powerful. Another one, Dorothy Hughes in A Lonely Place. I mean, this is like the Academy Award for Best Picture here. So I'm listing the possibilities. Yeah. A powerful story from the point of view of a psychopath or a sociopathic killer who preys on women. And Dorothy is under-regarded and should be as big as the top 5 in noir. And then I'm going to ignore Cormac because I already liked him. So I'm going to pick Horace McCoy because damn, Horace McCoy, like how do you make a story about a dance so powerful? Those would be my top contenders, and that leaves out a lot of good books. But if I had to pick one book that said you're amazing and you did something that others did not do, and you're going to sit with Justin for a long time, longer than the others, almost impossible. But I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say Dorothy Hughes in A Lonely Place pushed me and pushed my understanding of the genre into places that were new and exciting. And I would say that for a variety of reasons, it is or deserves the top slot.
That's a good choice, Justin. I can see that. I can 100% see that in A Lonely Place it would be a top contender. You have anything more you want to say about that before I get into mine, or?
No, okay. I'd love for you to share yours. I'm
well,
curious.
I didn't necessarily look at it as a list like you did. I wanted to pick one clear winner. But if I was going to do that, I think my list wouldn't look that different than yours. I mean, I really want to get back to David Goodis as well. There is something about his writing that really invoked this feeling that I want from the genre. And you said it better than I, but he's definitely on there with the Piano Player book. I really love the Total Chaos book and that trilogy from Jean-Claude Izzo. It remains a favorite for me. As we said, Jim Thompson and Cormac McCarthy are kind of already, they're off the table in this list because they are so good. But, I In a Lonely Place was definitely in my top 3. But for me, the best book, the book that sticks with me the most throughout. Yep, drum roll. It's They Shoot Horses, Don't They, by Horace McCoy.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I would not have expected that.
I didn't necessarily either when I first sat down with the list. But when I think about it, when I think about all the things that I love about this genre, first of all, it defied my expectations. The writing is tight, it's terse, it's bleak. It's a short book. And it says so much. That was I believe one of our longer episodes was on this short little novella of a book. It's
barely a novel.
It sticks with me. I don't know. There's just something. There's something, I don't know. I hate to use a term like this, but otherworldly about it to me. It haunts me, and that's ultimately what I want from noir. So many of these books that we covered were really solid, despite the ones that were, whatever, bad. But the majority of the work that we looked at, both as main topics, as supporting books for our subject to unknowns, our 5-round bursts, our biographies, all of that stuff was pretty, really solid writing. I mean, 90% of the things that we covered on the show, I would have no problem recommending to somebody and say, here, give this a try. But this book, for whatever reason, it just sits with me, and I think a lot of it has to do with that existentialism that we talked about during that episode. And we did a little 101 on that if you're interested. But I'm going to share a quote just about, this is just from a couple years ago. A reviewer with The Guardian, Anita Seth, said of They Shoot Horses, Don't They? She said, "The brutality of the story is offset by the poetic beauty and precision of McCoy's narrative as it hones in on the thoughts and aspirations of its outsider characters, their troubled voices lingering in the mind." And that's why it works for me, because it lingers. I think about this book weekly, I don't know, probably. It just does something for me that no other book that we read does, and that's why it's now my number one.
That's impressive. I get it, though. It is a book that stuck with both of us. It's a book that defies expectation, convention, and also formula. It's a book that nobody would have imagined and said that's gonna work. That's gonna be a crime fiction bestseller. It's weird. It's confusing, but there's such a degree of depth. It transcends the genre while also maintaining such a hard-boiled, noirish, fatalistic, nihilistic, existential quality to itself that it raises so many more questions that it answers, and it leaves you definitely uncomfortable. Prepare for a poor night's sleep after reading this book, not because it's a horror story, but because it forces you to look in the fucking mirror. And it says a lot of things about society and human experience that a lot of these books attempt to capture. None in so few words and in so few pages.
I think if we had to give a top couple of books, I mean, I think definitely Dorothy Hughes in A Lonely Place. They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Shoot the Piano Player. Those would all be in the top 5.
Yeah, Shoot the Piano Player. I agree. And Dorothy, for a similar reason to Horace, the sociopathic narrator in that story raises a lot of questions and creates a lot of situations where we're forced to contend with the darkness in a way that is unrelenting, and it sticks with you. It leaves a sheen on your skin, like a gross ass like San Francisco.
That's
fog.
right. Get out the soap and try to scrub it off. You're
Exactly.
now filthy. Well, folks, that has been our look back at 50 episodes of Point Blank. I actually think we have 54 episodes or something like that with some of the extras. But yeah, it's been a good ride so far, and we're looking forward to the next episodes coming up.
Yeah, we already have our next 20 or so mapped out, but let me tell you a little bit about the ones coming up after this one, just the next few. Episode 52, we're going to have a subject unknown where we dive into spy fiction. This is a genre we haven't spent any time on, really, so we're going to try to cover it loosely in a way that we can do in an hour or so. And then after that, episode 53, we're going to revisit one of my favorite detective fiction authors, Raymond Chandler, for the second time only, Farewell, My Lovely, considered by many to be his best work. Episode 54, we're going to do 5-round reviews where we do 5-round bursts, but it's more extended for a whole episode, focused on a variety of reviews from books to television to film or whatever it is we feel like talking about. And I'll leave you with one more after that. Episode 55, we're going to do another subject unknown, and this is going to be on S.A. Cosby's Blacktop Wasteland, which is a wonderful book, but also South Atlantic crime fiction in general, trying to capture the crime fiction of North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia. What's going on over there by Chesapeake and all those weird-ass Carolina islands off the coast? Maybe nothing. We'll find out.
Well, I bet there's something going on. Yeah, if you want to get in touch with the show, you can find us on Facebook at Point Blank, Hardboiled Noir and Detective Fiction. You can send us an email at pointblanknoir@gmail.com. That's probably the best way to get a hold of us or ask us a direct question is shoot us an email. You can also check out our Goodreads group. Go on there, search for Point Blank, and you should be able to find it. There's been a bit of discussion lately, so it's got some new readers and listeners engaged on that platform as well.
If you want to send us some money, you're welcome to do that through our Patreon account.
You can,
we'll take it.
We will, and we'll put it to good use. Thank you very much for listening to this retrospective episode. And if you've been with us for all these episodes or even are just found us, we really thank you and hope you are enjoying our conversations about noir and detective fiction.
Without you, this would be a lonely business, far more lonely than it is. And thanks to you, Kurt. It's been a pleasure working with you for the past 51 episodes.
This has been a real joy, Justin. I'm glad we did this, and I'm glad we get to, not that we need a reason, but it makes us hang out and talk to each other more often than we would probably otherwise. So that's been a real joy. I look forward to the next 50.
Agreed. All right, folks. We'll see you. We'll see you soon. Stay safe out there.
Bye-bye.
Point Blank is under a Creative Commons license. Music is by Justin. Copywritten works are property of their respective holders.